essay for. So the other thing we've been working on, besides, you've got to think about your reader, is learning to read your own writing. Right? It's not as easy as it seems. When you've gotten those papers back from me and they're marked and you're like, duh, I read this 1,000 times. Why is that mistake there? It's because our brains are always trying to help us. Right? They're reading that word in there for us because, yeah, I knew you meant it. And we're like, well, that wasn't helpful that time. Thank you, brain. No. Right? But in terms of, and I'll give you this handout in a little while, so you don't have to write this all. I'll send you home with it, okay? But learning to read your own writing is key. Learning to read it like a reader. And that's what we're doing. And this is also about analysis. Not only being able to read your own writing like a reader, but looking at it critically. And that doesn't mean bad, because that's saying here's what works, here's what doesn't, or whatever it is. So here's the point. I'm going to give it to you with all the words, and you can read through those at home. What you're going to do is you're going to spend, say, the next couple of days, you don't have to do it 24/7, and I know this is a crazy thing to ask, thinking like an English teacher. I know, you're scared. I'm kind of scared for you. You're going to imagine that you're going to pick one of your essays, one or two, and you're going to imagine that you just decided, I'm going to just turn this into the perfect essay. I always look at my finished work and I say, wow, I could do this, I could do that. Do I do that? No, not often. I'm not giving you a list of my publications, okay? It's work, right? So I'm asking you to do two things. One is look at it, and when you've looked back at your writing and you go, why did I do that? Anybody done that before? That's the moment you say, cool, I've grown. I know more. Be very proud of that feeling. So I want you to look at it for two things. You're going to talk about two things in this essay. One is, what strengths does your essay have? What's something you like that works well? And with that, you've got to give an example and then discuss, why is it a strength? How does it add to the essay? Or how could you be used elsewhere in the essay? I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time saying, I can't do this, I don't do this well, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. Anybody else there with me? I should work more, I should work less, I should work harder, I should whatever it is, right? And that's important. We can't just I don't believe we can say we're all perfect and just go along. I don't believe we grow then. But we need to know our strengths. Because when you know your strengths, you say, hey, I can use this. I am good at this thing. Now, does this sound familiar yet? Sound like anything else we've done? I've been preparing you to write this essay since day one. You've already written baby drafts of this essay. We're just going to expand it a little more, okay? Because the other thing you're going to talk about is what improvements. And so just like with that cover letter, it could be something I've looked at my writing, I'm like, well, I screwed this up, right? And here's how I would fix it. Or it could be things, well, this was okay, but I could do it better. If I were going to be crazy English teacher world and make this the perfect essay, you know what? Yeah, I like this all right, but here's what I would do or do more of or something like that. And so with that, what's an improvement? An example. So again, you're quoting from your essay. If you've got a long part, you may just say, it's this paragraph, but, one part that sticks out, and you're giving that example. Why does it need improvement? How it might be strengthened. Again, you give an example by saying, instead, I would do this. Yeah, and then how will that improve it? And sometimes this why does it need improvement and how will that improvement kind of go together, okay? But that's the same thing there. So what I'm grading this on, you're writing it in class next time. I'm grading it on, and of course you're going to have an introduction and a conclusion. I'm grading this on, have you followed instructions? That means talked about these things. So if you don't talk about these things, I'm sad. Weep. Okay. But if you talk about these things, I'm happy. And what do we want? Happy readers, right? And you be thoughtful. You be thoughtful about it and you follow instructions. I'm like, man, you are winner, chicken dinner. I guess I'm going to have to take y'all all out for dinner, right? Because you're going to do that. So that's cool to think about. Let's look at how it's done. I've got 4 samples. Key things with these samples is unlike the work you'll be doing on Friday, you'll be writing it in class. And again, I put down my pen, I sit on my hands if I have to, and I just read it. That's it. I read it. These were written out of class over the course of a couple weeks, so they're cleaner, they're, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not worried about that because I've already seen and nailed you for not spell checking or doing this stuff or that, right? And I know when you type it up, you're going to do all that stuff. You do that stuff for yourself. So keep that in mind that these are written out of class. The first two essays almost get to the goals. They get really close. They discuss specific points, but they don't give those examples. Those examples are very important. But one of the reasons I like to use them is because they're a little more analytical. They're not quite the formality of 3. You'll see these are very much like the same kind of professional voice we use in those letters that's professional, but at the same time comfortable, depending on, like I said, if you were writing to a teacher who you called doctor or miss all the time, you might have a little more formality. Somebody you don't know. With me, it's that balance. It's still professional, right? So it's still that tone, but these are more analytical, just kind of looking at the parts. And so if you're more comfortable with that kind of writing, that kind of voice, I want you to see that. You just got to follow through with it. So that's the reason we look at those. The final essays, the last 2, are more narrative in voice. So they're much more like essay 1. If you were more comfortable writing in that much more kind of personal, telling the story voice, they're great examples of that. They are great examples, whatever kind of writing you're doing, of hitting every one of these things we've got to do. Talk about this, give an example, talk about that. You want to remember, like your letter, the essay is really between you and me. So when you say you in here, make sure it's Kelly. Right? I know you're saying you. When these writers say you, they mean Kelly. You don't need to summarize or retell your essay, even though I can't remember right here and now. When you say, in essay 1 where I talked about this or that, boom, I will probably not only remember that essay, but remember where I was sitting or standing when I graded it and read it. I may never remember your name again, but I literally ran into a student a couple of years ago in Walmart in the freezer section. Details, right? And I was like, your grandparents' house on that lake and those steps up to it. She was like, yeah. And it was her emblematic essay. It was those steps that, she talked about that, or that porch there. So I didn't remember her name, but man, I remembered that essay. So you don't have to retell me what it's about. I've read it, okay? It'll come back to me, and it's a nice little nostalgic trip through the past for me. There we go. Let's just look at samples. That's easier, okay? So this first one, and I'm going to hand you paper to write on next time. It is set up in MLA format, so it has blanks for you to fill in for, your essay and everything else that goes in MLA, okay? This one's called What I'd Like to Revise in My Sunny Day Essay. Now notice her essay was titled Sunny Day, so when she uses the title of that essay, just like in your letter, you put it there, right? She doesn't put the whole title in the quotes, just the title of the other essay. Now, as a title, all right. This essay was kind of the opposite of the emblematic object. With the emblematic object, you had to pick something physical and really write about what it meant in the abstract, right? In your life overall, these other things. This is the opposite. They had to take something abstract, like a sunny day. I mean, you can't go and buy that on the shelf at Walmart, right? And so it's not physical. I mean, we experience, but it's not a physical thing. And then talk about a kind of deeper meaning in that way. So it's similar to that emblematic object. All right, in my last assignment, I attempted to capture my own enjoyment of winter days and communicate it to the reader. What I'm not sure I did is to convince the reader that a sunny day really is of great value. The examples I chose were concrete events that I thought conveyed how sunny, warm days allowed for enjoyable activities. But I think I failed to fully discuss the feelings these days engender, therefore weakening my argument. Dwelling upon what feelings sunny days evoked for me is only one of the many ways I could improve this essay. In general, I think I need to apply deeper analysis to all elements of the work. The simplicity of this essay is most evident when I state my thesis in the second paragraph. A sunny day amidst plenty of stormy ones is as valuable as an oasis in a parched desert. The sentence itself is not faulty, but as a thesis statement, it lacks depth. It's veiled in a catchy analogy, but on its own really states that a sunny day is very valuable. To add more interest to the essay, I think I might strive for more complexity in my thesis. For example, in which less superficial, less obvious ways does the presence of sunshine uplift and enhance the experience of a day? Okay, that's really cool. She says, hey, here's something, and she says, it's not bad. It's a good sentence, but it needs more, right? And she says, okay, I have this idea, but wouldn't it be great to say I might instead begin with some description and elaborate more on my thesis statement, period. For example, I might add this or start with this. Boom. And then have an example, the start of it, whatever. So again, that example, when you're talking about improvements, here's something that either didn't work, I don't like, or I screwed up. That's fine. We all screw up. We've all been wrong. Or, yeah, I like it, but I could make it better. Here it is. Give an example of it. And then talk about how you'd make it better. And then say, for example, I could do this. And if it's a whole paragraph, you could say, yeah, maybe I'd change, and we'll see one here where she actually changes the whole paragraph. Well, she's writing this out of class in over 2 weeks, right? We're writing in class. So you might say something like, I would start that paragraph off by saying, and kind of give that first sentence and say, and then go on and talk about the rest of it, right? So it doesn't have to be a long one. On a more mechanical grammatical level, many of the sentences in this essay were too lengthy. I tend to pack lots of information into one sentence, causing many to become borderline run-ons. My reluctance to split up long sentences leaves my writing a little awkward sounding at times. One such sentence follows. I had never been to the Bay Area without the protection of at least a sweater, but as we walked along Fisherman's Wharf, waiting for my dad to join us from his convention, not even the slightest breeze chilled our bare shoulders. This can obviously be remedied simply through creating 2 new sentences. Well, I could probably create 3 different variations of 2 new sentences there, right? So what would you do and why? And when we've talked about punctuation, I've talked about using those short sentences for power, that colon is kind of, pointing toward things, that dash is even stronger in terms of setting off extra information or something. Thinking about how you would use even those very simple things, because those simple things create voice and tone and feeling. Thinking about how you would use those is just as valuable as thinking about big sentences and big parts. Here's what I would do. That's all she needs to say, because she's already said I would change it and how it would help. Here's what I would do. Colon. Boom. Give that. Just like that. So again, good stuff. We need that follow through, that show me the money. One of the most glaring faults of my essay was the conclusion. In my haste to wrap up another assignment, I whipped up one of the most general, cliche, boring, summary paragraphs I've ever composed. Without much thought, I compacted the content of my entire essay into a few very overused phrases that seemed to sum up and restate a very elementary thesis. Ooh, and what would we put here? Colon, right? Introduce that quote there. Sun seems to have, this was way before I started learning and teaching punctuation better, so not her fault, teacher's fault. Sun seems to have a positive effect on everyone, making us all find the silver lining in daily events. The result was utterly dull and predictable. I might have written in place of this rehash paragraph, perhaps something refreshing. Perhaps I could have used something to represent my thesis message instead of obviously restating it. So again, almost there. I might have started that off or ended that or whatever with this example. In a revision of this sunny day essay, I might focus on presenting my arguments with more personal and emotional evidence. While occurrences made for clear and communicative examples, supporting evidence that express my own feelings might further convince the reader of sunlight's value. Moreover, I might use more analytical techniques to portray this feeling so my content would show through rather than being disguised by heavy description and overly elegant wording. Now, is that a good writer? She didn't follow through, but her writing's solid, right? My heart is broken. She never once says, hey, I did this well. Yeah, All right? I mean, like, she's got to have something good going on there. Some sentence that works, some moment. I use that. I'd never used colons before, and man, I used it here, and I like the way it works, or the dash, or whatever. Doesn't matter. So don't break my heart that way either, right? I've read all your work. You've got something good going on. I can tell you about every single one of you. Okay? Make sure and look for those things. We want to look for our faults. We want to fix those things. We want to look for our weaknesses, things we can improve all the time. But we also need to know, hey, I'm pretty good at this. This isn't bad. That's important. So, all right. So it's a good, but you can see how it's just kind of more just this essay, this, and it's more that kind of just straightforward, a little more analytical style or just formal voice, not totally formal, but very straightforward. The next one's the same thing, and this is adding some details. I definitely like the title better. Title's not going to make or break you, but it is icing on the cake. And when you're giving a reader something, start them off with icing, right? Make them happy. This one is, this is emblematic object. Have y'all heard of those places where there's like white stuff that comes out of the sky? And people take these flat things and they get on them and they go down hills? And it's really cold? Yeah, they get on a sled and they go sledding in the snow? Yeah, this is a scar he got when he was sledding on the snow. Okay. All right, every essay needs revised. My second assignment essay needs a few major revisions to make it better. First of all, the assignment was focused on adding detail to my descriptions. While I added some detail, my descriptions could have used a lot more. I also could have talked about a smaller portion of my experience. For instance, instead of describing the whole situation from beginning to end, I probably should have focused more on the exact moment when the injury occurred. Other than that, my essay could have used a few technical changes, but the main problem was my lack of detail in my descriptions. So you notice in both of these, we have an introduction, right? My introductory paragraph was good and provides an overview of the rest of the essay. One sentence stands out, though. I remember all the details vividly from that experience. After reading the essay all the way through once as a reader, I'm still searching for those details that are so vividly remembered. I do not describe the weather at all, even though it was winter and the snow should have provided a good opportunity for me to include some details. These details about the weather would have fit nicely in the second paragraph. The second paragraph should also include an overview of the situation. So here we go. Again, good writer so far. This is clear, grammatical things. Not too many grammatical things going on. And okay, here's something, but again, show me the money. So coming through with those improvements, the key thing is make sure to show the money on the other side. My next two paragraphs focus on the rides my friend and I took on the hill. I described the rocky hill, the speed of the sled, and the way we rode down the hill, but I did not successfully describe my feelings during this experience. I said we must have been going twice as fast and we flew off one of the jumps. This is a decent description of the actual situation, but descriptions of my feelings would have helped to give the reader a more complete sense of what was going on. Boom, just adding, I would start that with, or I would add to that a sentence or two. Boom. These really get those emotions. Other than lack of detail, there are a few technical things that stand out. First, there is one sentence which says, it sure felt weird. This is not a particularly effective sentence in my essay. Obviously, it would be a weird feeling looking at your knee and seeing a gaping hole in blood, but I should have described this better. I also focused a lot on the lessons I learned from the scar. This is good, but when I revise, I should clean this up to make the essay stronger. After reading my essay and looking for areas to improve, the main thing that came across to me was detail. The assignment was set up to improve my descriptions, and I did not completely fulfill this assignment. Improving my descriptions will greatly improve my essay. The other revision that would help make my essay better would be improve my sentences and other mechanical issues. This was not a major problem in the essay, but it would certainly help. Kind of sounds like one of those wind-up conclusions. I've written them too. Okay. But again, good writer, very strong writer. I'm still sad. Where's that good stuff? He kind of alludes to some of it, but he never really says, hey, you know what? Here's one part I really like. So, but think about this tone. So both of these, the first one there's a little more vocabulary in there. She's got a little more vocabulary going on. These are very much natural writing, just kind of describing and telling, here are the parts. And so that tone is fine. You just want to make sure you follow through. If, however, you were more comfortable with the first one, then these are good examples of both following through. So no matter how you write this, go with that. So if you're more comfortable with like the voice in your letters, that's really what these first two examples are. They're that voice. If you're more comfortable with that kind of first essay, that more personal voice, then these two give you that. This one is called Discovering Revision. And, this one's emblematic. This one's emblematic object too. You'll get it. I've never liked revising. I usually like exactly what I've written the first time around, and besides a few spelling or grammatical errors, not very much gets changed in my essays. Oh sure, once in a while I can find a way to make something make a little more sense, like I could do with that sentence, but I'd rather not. Raw writing intrigues me more than a finished, polished product, even though I know it's polishedness that people want. I've never really worked for other people, but this essay called for something different. It called for a thorough revision of something, careful thought about my already satisfactory writing, thought on what could be better and how to make it better. Am I capable of this? Me? Miss Anti-Revision? Well, things you don't expect happened every day, so I decided to give it a go. Reading through my essay, I first noticed I used a decent amount of description, and I also noticed I could have elaborated on most of it. The day where we got to hold koalas doesn't exactly mean much to anyone who wasn't on the trip with me. Why did we get to hold koalas? Why was that so exciting? And come to think of it, who were we? Reading through my essay, I noted this was a real trouble spot. I'd referred to things that were completely obvious to me, but to the naive but interested reader, and she's quoting from the assignment there, confusing and undescript. So what could I do? Go back and write my second paragraph all over again? Some things just have to be done, I suppose. Here it goes. And before I read you this paragraph, I'd like you to know this was written during a time when we had cell phones, but not ones with email and pictures. Okay? So, you couldn't stand there from your phone and do that. There was no Instagram back in the olden days. I can still remember the day I first saw the necklace with crystal clarity. The day was one of the pinnacles of the trip, and every other teenager on the adventure with me was just as excited as I was. This was the day we not only got to feed kangaroos and watch a boomerang throwing demonstration, this was the day we got to hold koalas. And not only did we get to hold koalas, we got to have a picture of us with the koala emailed to our homes half the globe away. To put it mildly, we were ecstatic, and none of us could wait for the moment of total koala bliss. I decided to pass the time I spent waiting for my turn in the gift shop, trying to turn my energies and thoughts to something besides holding koalas. So she redoes the whole paragraph. If you look at it and you're like, hey, wait, I would redo it. You don't have to do that. We're writing in class. You could say, so instead I would start it with this or end it with this or whatever, right? And give that example. And then she says she does a good thing because she's got a quote. And what do we always want to do when we have quotes? We want to talk about them, right? She says, I like that better. A little bit more explanatory and clear, especially when it came to explaining what exactly we were doing holding koalas. Also, as I read through my original, I couldn't believe how many synonyms I'd used for koala. Friendly ball of fuzz? What was I thinking? I said before I'd used a decent amount of description, and I also said I could have elaborated on it. A koala chain carved out of shiny iridescent mother of pearl and hung on a thin silver chain could be many things depending on whom you're talking to. You're talking to him? Yeah. Oh, whom? I decided to elaborate my description, but not in the third paragraph, except to add the word small in before koala. I thought the larger elaboration would fit better in my fourth paragraph after my first sentence. Now I can't really imagine myself without that necklace. I'm adding in this. Every time I look in the mirror, it looks back at me, a little smiling koala the size of 2 peas and as cute as a button. I also changed the first sentence of my last paragraph from, though the paint on the koala's eyes and nose is long gone and has been joined by a charm of 16th notes, it is still the same necklace bought on the best adventure of my life, too, even though the black paint on the koala's eyes and nose is long gone and it constantly gets tangled with all my other necklaces, it still stands out as the necklace bought on the best adventure of my life. What else is there to fix? I found myself almost eagerly thinking. Then I realized what I was doing. I was turning into a revision freak. Why me? The immense task of rethinking, rewriting an essay was not supposed to be fun. I decided it must just be the spirit of the evening. Who wouldn't be happy after doing their Shakespeare homework? Y'all have clearly never done Shakespeare homework. You don't realize that is a joke. I noticed I jumped around a little in my essay. My transitions weren't always the smoothest, but I liked them that way. Is that anti-revision showing its face? No, I like jumpy styles in everything. When scenes randomly pop up in movies and chapters seem to come out of nowhere in books, that's when I'm hooked. Though my essay isn't completely random, it's the way I like it, and isn't that the best way? So there she addresses a strength. I'd really kind of like to see a little bit more specifics about it. I like this part when I did this or that. You wouldn't be rewriting that because it's more conceptual, but pointing to specific in the paper, that becomes much more specific there. After reading through my essay again, I decided there was only one thing left that I really didn't like, and that was the closing sentence of my fourth paragraph. It's just a bank full of everything. Sentence doesn't really sound like it belongs. It also doesn't sound like a good close for that paragraph or lead into the next paragraph. I decided to change it to something a bit more descriptive. It's a photo album filled with not just pictures, but moments of my life, moments that are most special to me. That sounds much better. Am I done already? That wasn't so bad. As I write these final sentences on my essay about revision, I wonder if I'll have time to revise this. I decide I'll make time. Revision isn't really evil, and though I wouldn't call it benign, it's closer to fun than I thought. I like my essay better now. I enjoyed having another chance to work on my essay, and the work I put into it now reflects even more than it did before. Best of all, my essay is now something I can be even more proud of. And she wraps it up with a little bow on it and says, here you go, right? So you can see there, she hit every single one of those things. The next one does it even better, right? That strength was a little bit vague, but, she does it. But also that is the much more just kind of familiar, I'm talking to you, personal, very personal writing voice. And so if that's where you're comfortable, that's cool. Now this last essay, these were done when I taught for Johns Hopkins and they had a distance program, and they would send out the first essay assignment. And I think the assignment they sent out with this one, or it was I can't remember the exact wording, but it's basically kind of talking about how you found your personal writing style or an experience with writing early on, something like that. You'll get it. She wrote her essay about, it was called Letters to Annie, and Annie was her dog when she was little. The dog got lost. I don't know if the dog got lost or got lost. I mean, this is a dog they'd had since before she was born. So, so I don't know what happened there, but the dog was not there anymore. And she calls it revision essay. Okay, we can't all be winners all the time. Okay, so whenever I write, it seems like I do most of the work of revising from the start. It takes me such a long time to write a single paragraph or choose a single word that by the time I'm finished, there are very few grammatical or organizational mistakes. I scrutinize everything, and one of my favorite parts of having people read my writing is that they point out things I should change that I had never noticed, even though I'd gone over those exact words seemingly millions of times. One strength I have when it comes to revising is that I really don't mind having my writing critiqued and criticized. At first, it was hard to accept other people's opinions, but I've come to realize that if I'm proud of what I write, even the most negative comments won't change that fact. I've learned how to use critiques to my advantage. Knowing what other people think of my writing gives me different perspectives and ideas. It's still really hard sometimes for me to let go of words or sentences that end up not working. Like in the last paragraph of my essay, Writing to Annie, you said the last sentence was kind of cliche and I needed to remember to show and not tell. I wrote, "It was the first time I ever pulled emotions out of my heart and set them to paper, and I believe it was the beginning of my life as a true writer." Originally, I had loved that sentence. I thought it was perfect, a good, strong ending that summed up everything I'd wanted to express throughout the essay. But I didn't realize that the entire point of writing the essay was so that I didn't need that sentence at the end. I was supposed to be able to convey that idea without one clear, concise sentence. Showing, not telling. I took the easy way out without even trying to. Looking back now, it really does seem kind of sappy and cliche. It's the type of thing parents or judges of an essay contest would probably love, people who aren't necessarily looking for flaws other than technicalities. They might not like my revised sentence as much because it requires more thinking and doesn't set everything out in the open. But for the sake of improving my writing, I attempted to change it, and even though I was critical of it at first, now I actually think I like it more than the original sentence. I was disappointed that I couldn't find my exact words, but I still remember clearly the gist of what I said. Pulling emotions out of my heart and setting them to paper created honest and sincere letters to my beloved lost dog. But in the end, they were actually much more. Although it still might need even more revising, I think it's a lot better than what I had at first. That was the major change I made in the essay. Pretty much everything else was just cut and paste, one word deleting, and starting new paragraphs. For instance, in two spots I started paragraphs in different places to put emphasis on certain parts of my essay. I moved. Finally, my fingers touched the keys, tentatively at first, slowly spelling out the words, to the end of the paragraph before it so the beginning of my letter Annie could start the next paragraph. That definitely made a strong impact on the start of the paragraph and was a really good idea. And then you can see here's an example of talking about organization, giving that example of where you'd move things. I'm glad the organization of my paragraphs was originally good. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell if transitions between ideas and paragraphs are smooth or not. So I was glad to hear that they worked out. I was happy with the way I was able to begin by showing what was happening, me sitting at the computer, to talking about how I'd always loved writing. When I first started writing the essay, I had no idea I was going to delve into my past as a writer, describing my first writing experiences in kindergarten and detailing how I found my personal writing style. It occurred to me as I was writing the essay. When I was finished, I wasn't sure if it really fit in with everything else, if it was too off subject. I was relieved that you thought it fit right in, so there's something good. Right? In everything I write, I like to make sure I have plenty of figurative language and alliteration, so that no matter how persuasive I'm trying to be, it can sound pretty too. For me, writing has to be interesting and flow. If I read something and all the words are straightforward and boring, without any frills, I won't be interested. My favorite writers are the ones who come up with the best similes and metaphors, original and unique, but describing whatever it is at the same time. I'm always impressed with good figurative language because it's just so gorgeous when it's used right. I think my favorite sentence in the entire essay is, the next night I was back at my computer, the same white glow filtering onto my young, freckled face, my eyes perusing the words I'd written the night before. They sounded good to me, connected smoothly like long satin ribbons on the page. For some reason, I really like how I compared my words to long satin ribbons. I was also proud of this sentence. I wrote until I couldn't think of anything else to say, and I looked over both of my letters to Annie, satisfied with the words I had so carefully strung together, blinking and glittering with emotion like Christmas lights delicately placed around a tree. Lights on a Christmas tree evoke such a pretty, delicate image to me. Once again, I was comparing my view of the letters I wrote to something else. Now I feel even more confident about my essay writing to Annie. Revising gives me such a sense of completion and crisp neatness. There aren't any messy sentences or awkward wordings anymore. The whole essay flows using the right word choices and transition sentences. Although revising is the hardest part of writing to me, I've come to realize through experience how necessary it is. Even if I think something I write is perfect, there will always be some way to make it even better. And so she nailed it. And so that's that, doing those things. But you can see the difference between kind of the voice in the first two and the second two. Write wherever you're comfortable. Just make sure you're doing what these second two and go through. Now, yours probably won't be as long as these either, right? Because if these were handwritten, they'd be a lot longer than just like 2 pages or so, okay? So what do you need to do? Well, you need to have, let's go back to the instructions. And again, I'll give you a copy of these. You got to have an introduction, right? You got to have something, hey, here's something that works in my essay, those strengths. That's probably a paragraph. You got to talk about that at least once. You got to talk about something you'd improve, whether it's something you're like, man, drop the ball on this, mess this up, or, yeah, I like it, but I can make it better. Either way, got to do that at least once. And then you got to have a conclusion. So you need to have a minimum of 4 paragraphs. So that's what we're looking at, making sure you talk at this. You want to do an extra one? That's cool. So